of optimism and community here, of people helping each other to recover from this disaster.
Understanding the reality.
You can't do what ICE is doing and get away with it.
With the latest global news and insightful documentaries, Al Jazeera's teams across the world bring you closer to the heart of the story.
The Trump administration says it is seizing children and separating families as a deterrent.
A Guatemalan child seized from his father and detained in the U.S. for 6 months finally returns as a shadow of himself. The family's dead from their failed attempt to emigrate, crippling. But could an unexpected call from the U.S. change the course of their future? The Return, a witness documentary filmed over 6 years on Al Jazeera.
Hello, I'm Mohammed Jamjoom. This is Al Jazeera live from Doha. Coming up on the program. Escalating violence in the occupied West Bank. Israeli forces arrest and tear gas Palestinians a day after deadly settler attacks. Iran summoned Ukrainian diplomat after Kyiv bombs an Iranian ship in the Caspian Sea. Tehran says at least one sailor was killed. France and Spain battle out-of-control wildfires that have burned through communities and forced 300,000 to flee their homes. Plus, led protest movement celebrates after the education minister steps down over a school exam scandal. The Israeli army has arrested dozens of Palestinians in the occupied West Bank as tensions rise after days of settler violence. Soldiers also fired tear gas at civilians and journalists in the Palestinian village of Tel. The mayor says around 70 people were detained. The arrests come after an Israeli settler attack in Tel on Friday. 4 Palestinians and 2 Israelis were killed in that incident. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has since promised to fast-track the approval of illegal settlements in the area in response.
The Israeli troops arrived as protection of the settlers and then started to shoot tear gas towards us, and we tended to many cases of tear gas suffocation, which included Palestinian journalists. We treated them and provided them with the needed care. People here are scared of what happened on Friday.
Middle East specialist and fellow at the Institute for Policy Studies and the author of the book Understanding Palestine and Israel. She says settlers aren't being held responsible for their crimes.
What we're seeing now is not new in the West Bank, but it is a major escalation. And one aspect of it is we're seeing an increase in direct war crimes. In this particular case, in the village of Tel, it's up in the north near Nablus, the settlers were the first group to attack the village. 4 Palestinians were killed. 2 Israelis, a soldier and a settler, died in the course of that incident as well. But what I think is very clear here is that whenever there is any kind of an incident like this, the response by the Israeli military and the settlers is to punish all the Palestinians. There is no accountability for Israeli settlers. And I think it's also important that we recognize that the distinction between settlers and the military, settlers and the IDF, settlers and the soldiers, these are false distinctions. You know, some of the settlers are themselves part of the Israeli military. They serve in the reserves. They are armed by the military. Many are trained by the military. They're all using U.S.-provided arms. So this distinction is not a very important one. They are all supported by the Israeli state. And what we're seeing here is a decision that they make to deliberately commit war crimes. So we're seeing collective punishment. That's one war crime of massive number of Palestinians. We're seeing attacks on hospitals where Palestinians, the hospital in Nablus and others, were attacked, and patients as well as doctors and other staff were detained, were bound. it's terrifying for patients and their families.
Until recently, opinion polls suggested the party of Israel's far-right minister, Bezalel Smotrich, may not win enough votes to re-enter parliament. But announcements about the expansion of illegal settlements in the occupied West Bank have given him a popularity boost. Noura Odeh explains.
This is Bezalel Smotrich, an Israeli settler who lives illegally in the occupied West Bank and a self-described fascist. He's also one of the most prominent political leaders of religious Zionism, a mix of Orthodox Judaism and Israeli ultra-nationalism. Sanctioned by several Western governments, he is an ally of Benjamin Netanyahu and popular among many young Jewish voters in Israel.
The goals of the next term: eliminating the idea of the Arab terrorist state, cancelling the cursed Oslo Accords, and advancing on the path of sovereignty, while encouraging immigration in Gaza and also in Judea and Samaria. In the long term, there is no other solution.
Yet polls suggest his religious Zionism party could fail to secure the required numbers of votes to join the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, in the upcoming elections. Smotrich is banking on his achievements as the minister in charge of the settlement department within the defense ministry to secure victory. Behind me is the illegal settlement of Beit Il near Ramallah. Now this is where settlers under Smotrich's command decide on the expansion of illegal settlements, the confiscation of Palestinian land and the demolition of Palestinian homes. The outcome has been unprecedented. 104 new illegal settlements and 185 illegal settlement outposts have been constructed, as well as 1,000 square kilometers of roads specifically to serve settlers, while demolishing more than 5,400 Palestinian homes and displacing at least 119 Palestinian communities. Smotrich has increased campaigning in recent weeks, announcing plans for 3 illegal settlements in the Gaza Strip and taking part in a march by a settler movement towards Gaza. Competition for the right-wing voter base is fierce ahead of the election. To ensure no votes are lost, Netanyahu is considering forming a joint list with the far-right party, which would secure Smotrich's continued influence over Israeli politics. Noura Odeh, Al Jazeera.
Iran has summoned Ukraine's diplomatic chief of mission after an attack on one of its commercial vessels in the Caspian Sea. Tehran says one sailor was killed and another injured in the Ukrainian attack. Ukraine says it was targeting Russian vessels carrying Iran-linked military cargo. President Volodymyr Zelensky also says Russia is assisting Iran in its military campaign in the Middle East.
Since the beginning of July, we have observed Russia conducting intensive satellite surveillance of the Gulf states and the U.S. military facilities located there. These satellite images are subsequently passed on to Iran. At the same time, there is a clear correlation between Russia's satellite imagery and Iranian strikes, both before attacks to support their planning and after attacks to assess the damage inflicted.
Tawhid Asadi has more from the Iranian capital, Tehran.
Following a recent Ukrainian attack to target an Iranian vessel in which at least one sailor was killed with some more injured, Tehran came out to strongly condemn the attack, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the country summoned a top Ukrainian diplomat to express their dissatisfaction pertaining to this recent incident. Meanwhile, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi had a phone conversation with the EU foreign policy chief in which he condemned the attack, and also he came out to actually call for a reaction from the international community and from the UN Security Council in particular. Also, in a separate statement, Iranian Ministry of Foreign Affairs came out to call it a hostile action against Iran, warning about the consequences and also warning about the Ukrainian intentions to what they called to extend the scope of the war. We know that contextually speaking, it's a very important development as Iran is dealing with a U.S. naval blockade, putting a huge amount of actually impact on the trade of the country, and this one is going to be investigated very much carefully by the Iranian side, whether this is going to be a one-off attack or a sort of policy by the Ukrainians is a key point of concern for Tehran at the time being. Toida Sadi, Al Jazeera, Tehran.
The U.S. military says its forces boarded a tanker in the Arabian Sea as part of its blockade on Iranian ports. Central Command posted this video of the incident involving a Comoros-flagged ship. It comes a day after American forces fired on another ship trying to breach the naval blockade. Al Jazeera's Rosalind Jordan has more from Washington, D.C.
The U.S. military did not conduct any airstrikes on Iranian military targets on Friday night. That's the first time in 2 full weeks that there have not been any U.S. military strikes on Iranian targets, a resumption of open conflict after a ceasefire had been reached between the two countries in the middle of their war, which started on February 28th. Now, while for all intents and purposes the memorandum of understanding between the two countries is understood to basically no longer be in effect, the U.S. and Iran are still having low-level contacts in order to try to find a way to perhaps restore the ceasefire, which was broken just about 2 weeks ago, as well as try to see if there is a way to get to an eventual end to the war. Now, the U.S. and Iran are still very much at loggerheads over control of the Strait of Hormuz. The U.S.'s position has traditionally been that this is an international waterway open to all commercial and military traffic, and no one single nation can control access in and out of the strait. The Iranians point to the memorandum of understanding as justification for their efforts, they say, to try to collect tolls on commercial vessels transiting the strait. At this point, the U.S. President Donald Trump has said that it would be perhaps the U.S.'s best interest to try to gain control of the strait, but given that there are no airstrikes currently underway, it's possible that this and other points of contention between the two nations may be under discussion. Rosalind Jordan, Al Jazeera, Washington.
Yemen's Ansarullah Houthis say they've carried out a series of retaliatory airstrikes targeting Saudi Arabia. The Iran-backed group says the operation focused on facilities belonging to Saudi state oil company Aramco in Jizan and Yanbu. The Houthis warned they're prepared to expand their military operations if the conflict escalates further. There are ongoing efforts to de-escalate, as Yusuf Mauri reports from the Yemeni capital.
A strong and defiant statement by the Ansarullah Houthi group, made not just through a TV statement, but through a series of military attacks that targeted the southern Saudi cities of Yanbu and Jizan. The Yemeni group says they launched dozens of cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, and Yemeni-made drones targeting oil facilities in both Yanbu and in Jizan. Now, local authorities in Saudi Arabia say these attacks that came from Yemen were all successfully intercepted by the Saudi air defense system. The Yemeni group, however, says their military operation was a success and that all intended targets were successfully hit. The latest flare in developments comes just one day after Saudi Arabia launched a military operation that targeted what it says are Houthi positions in the province of Qudayda and also in the island of Kamaran. The island of Kamaran is considered to be Yemen's biggest island. It is actually very close to Bab al-Mandab, where the ships are being targeted and where the ships are being turned away from by the Ansar.
Climate change and reduce poverty. But 101 East reveals how the program has failed to meet most targets.
The thing about satellite images is that they don't lie.
Failing the Philippines forests on Al Jazeera.
High-profile interviews, conversations with global leaders, icons, and alternative voices shaping our times. Hear their story on Talk to Al Jazeera.
Every year, children prepare to return to school, but some of them are still waiting for a school bag that carries their dreams. Since 2017, Hands for Charity has been supporting children in their education. Across 15 countries, we provide them with essential school supplies. Going back to school is not just the beginning of a new academic year, but a path toward a brighter future. Donate now to the School Bag Project.
You're watching Al Jazeera. Here's a reminder of our top stories this hour. Israel has arrested dozens of Palestinians in the occupied West Bank as tension rises over days of settler violence. Soldiers have fired tear gas at civilians and journalists, while settlers have also set fire to a mosque in the town of Busra. The U.S. military says its forces boarded a tanker in the Arabian Sea as part of its blockade on Iranian ports. It comes a day after American forces fired on another ship trying to breach the naval blockade. Iran has summoned Ukraine's diplomatic chief of mission after an attack on one of its commercial vessels in the Caspian Sea. Tehran says one sailor was killed. Kyiv says it was targeting Russian ships carrying military cargo for Iran. At least one person has been killed after a car drove into a crowd at a public event in Berlin. At least 15 others have been injured. Police say many of them are in a life-threatening condition. There's currently a large emergency services presence with police officers and fire department units deployed to the area. It happened near Tiergarten Park, which is close to the iconic Brandenburg Gate in the city center. Police say they have identified a suspect and are seeking his arrest. The European Union will allow member states to sell Russian oil seized from tankers linked to Moscow's so-called shadow fleet. The measure is part of the bloc's latest sanctions package aimed at increasing pressure on the Kremlin over the war in Ukraine. EU officials say selling the confiscated cargo will prevent valuable shipments from going to waste while reducing Russia's oil revenues. Chris Weafer is the CEO of Macro Advisory, a strategic consultancy which focuses on Russia and the Eurasia region. He says stricter enforcement of EU sanctions could sharply increase tension with Moscow.
It sets the stage for a potential escalation between Russia and Europe. It really all depends on the level of enforcement. Europe has enacted 21 separate packages of sanctions and put other measures in place, especially against the so-called shadow tanker fleet. But enforcement has been quite light. So there really hasn't been much of a reaction from Moscow to the actions of Europe thus far. So if this is just like another warning from Europe, then nothing will change. But if there is an increase in the number of tankers that will be boarded or targeted by EU forces, then there will be a response from Moscow. The Kremlin has made that quite clear. Either they will look to confiscate EU-owned assets in Russia, for example, by EU-based companies, to compensate for the value of the cargoes lost, or they have said also if there is an escalation, they reserve the right to put military forces on the tankers or to protect the tankers with naval assets, and that therefore raises the risk then of a military clash between Russia and the EU.
Raging wildfires across France and Spain have forced more than 300,000 people to evacuate as firefighters struggle to contain them. These are some of the latest pictures from Gironde region of southwest France, where fires have burnt down entire communities. The French government has called in the military to help. Some 1,500 soldiers have been deployed. And neighboring Spain has declared a national emergency. Sonia Gallego reports.
The charred wreckage of what stood in the way of the wildfire tearing through Gironde in western France. One man stands in what remains of his home.
Oh, this is my home. Well, it used to be. I don't see anything anymore. I see desolation. I see my ancestors' house. My grandmother was born in that house. There's nothing left.
Engulfing everything in its path, these fires have consumed homes, businesses, scorching the countryside, forcing tens of thousands of people to flee at short notice, taking what they can, including their pets, and take refuge at Bordeaux's Expo Centre. Military planes have been scrambled to dump retardant on forests, slowing down the fire's destructive path. Across the border in Spain, crews battle to contain several wildfires in the northeast and central regions, racing to slow their advance on the capital, Madrid. Officials say this has already been one of the worst wildfires on record for the region. During a visit to one of the affected villages, Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez said the priority was doing everything possible to save lives.
We are going to have some complex hours ahead, because although the temperatures have gone down, we do not know exactly how the wind will develop, how strong it will be.
These are some of the most intense wildfires seen in years, an emergency that has prompted a Europe-wide response, with several nations contributing resources to battle flames driven by hot temperatures, strong winds and exceptionally dry landscapes. Sonia Gallego, Al Jazeera.
Typhoon Nul has made landfall in southern China, bringing strong winds and heavy rain to Guangdong province and neighboring Hong Kong. More than 340,000 people have been evacuated. Rail services and dozens of flights have also been canceled. Authorities had issued the highest level warning ahead of the storm. There are no confirmed reports of casualties so far. India's youth-led Cockroach Janta Party says it will end its protests after holding talks with the government. It comes after the Education Minister, Dharmendra Pradhan, resigned, following weeks of nationwide demonstrations over exam paper leaks. Juliet Eger reports.
A major victory for youth-led protests swept across India. The Education Minister has stepped down.
What did they used to say? That in this government there will be no resignations. We just want to say the world will bow. We just need someone to make them bow.
For more than a month, tens of thousands have joined demonstrations led by the Cockroach Janta Party over a dispute sparked by examination paper leaks. In the 12 years that Prime Minister Narendra Modi's Bharatiya Janta Party has been in power, this is the first time one of his ministers has resigned under pressure. Dharmendra Pradhan said it wasn't a matter of personal prestige. He described young people as the strength of the nation and said he would not allow them to become trapped in a cycle of confusion and delusion. Protesters have been demanding accountability after millions of students had to retake a medical entrance exam when the original paper was leaked. At least 20 students reportedly took their own lives.
My child would have been here if the paper leak didn't happen. But this failed system took my child's life.
They joined the demonstrations organised by the newly formed Cockroach Janta Party. The movement took its name from a comment the Chief Justice made in May comparing unemployed young people and activists to cockroaches. The derogatory term became a badge of honour.
The government has actually heard what the student wanted. So there's a long way to go and there are many demands, I think, what CJP and the students want, and it won't be that this resignation would change everything.
Everybody was so angry in the morning. Even I was like, I feel very sad. The people are doing suicide and somebody is, dying and everybody is here. So I was so sad, but now it's the perfect moment.
The movement has demanded compensation for families of the students who died, for protesters not to be prosecuted, and for police officers who cracked down on the rallies to be held accountable. An Indian minister says the government will comply. Prime Minister Modi has been widely criticised for silencing dissent. The youth-led protests mark one of the biggest challenges since he took office in 2014. A clear message that India's younger generation won't be silenced. Julie Dager, Al Jazeera.
Thousands have gathered in Tunisia's capital
and barred from seeking office. Unable to attend the rally in person, the former president addressed the convention through a video generated with artificial intelligence. The AI-generated message urged supporters to back the blood of my blood, his son and political heir. The rally became a showcase of international conservative support. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu sent a video endorsing Flavio Bolsonaro, while Argentina's President Javier Milei traveled to São Paulo to campaign alongside him.
We trust you, Flavio, to put a stop to this socialist garbage.
Milei's endorsement reflects a broader effort by conservative leaders across Latin America to strengthen political alliances. For them, Brazil is the biggest prize. It is Latin America's largest economy, and a conservative victory here would reshape the region's political balance.
Our hope is to see right-wing parties grow in Latin America so we can have better countries.
But Flavio Bolsonaro, whose family has close ties to U.S. President Donald Trump, faces challenges of his own. His name has come up in an ongoing financial scandal investigation, and opinion polls also show him trailing President Lula, who is seeking a fourth non-consecutive term.
The Bolsonaro name still carries weight here. The question now is whether it's enough to win a presidential election.
The election is expected to be one of Brazil's most closely watched in decades, with implications for the country's direction and for politics across Latin America. Monica Yanakiev, Al Jazeera, São Paulo.
You can find a lot more on our top stories on our website, aljazeera.com. There's more news here at the top of the hour. Al Jazeera Explains is next. I'm Mohammed Jamjoom. Stay with us.
Examining the impact of today's headlines,